is and I will be presenting my project on agent-based modeling of monkeypox in the 2022 outbreak. Now it's called Mpox because they decided to change it because maybe monkeypox doesn't sound very good. Right? So I chose to study Mpox, I should say, in 2022 in New York City. And you might think, why choose New York City? And the reason behind that is, first of all, it's a very densely populated city, and also New York City has the highest amount of LGBTQ plus population, and you'll see why that matters in a second. And before I go any further, I should probably say that monkeypox is something that it's a disease that has a rash. So if you don't like looking at rashes, I suggest that for this next slide to look away. But I don't think it's that. Just a warning. And also another thing is that even though monkeypox is not an STI, sexually transmitted infection, or sexually transmitted disease, it's still mostly transmitted by sex. So here in the first picture, you can see how the rash develops over time. Right? During days 1 and 2, you don't really see much of it, and then it starts to rise up and eventually becomes a scab and falls off. But monkeypox is mostly known for the characteristic rash. But there's also other symptoms like fever, chills, nasal congestion, sore throat, whatever. Which, if people just get that and they don't have the rash, they might just think that they have a fever or a cold or something. So transmission of Mpox, like I said before, it's not really a sexually transmitted disease, but it's mainly transmitted that way because it has to do with touching people with the rash. Right? So it isn't, you don't have to have sexual intercourse to get it. So touching like hugging, massaging, kissing, anything that involves touching the person directly. Now, at first, we were not sure if touching surfaces would necessarily transmit the disease. It turns out touching contaminated surfaces doesn't really matter. It isn't spread easily that way either. So the reason why we chose the agent-based modeling as opposed to something like the traditional SIR model with the dynamical systems is because in traditional SIR models, it's just we're accounting for the entire population. We're accounting for everyone instead of just a certain demographic, a certain group of people. Now, back to why I chose the agent-based modeling is because Mpox pretty much almost exclusively affects non-straight males, so gay and bisexual male, through male-to-male sex. Right? So it would not make sense to consider everyone in the population because most people who are affected by this are sexually active, they're mostly male, and they're also engaging in intercourse, not just with one partner, but maybe multiple different partners. So unlike other presentations that I've given or anyone else is going to give here, the agent-based model doesn't really have any equations. And so if you're going to ask me for an equation, I won't have one for you because it's mostly just coding. And I use Python, by the way, because this is an object-oriented programming. So it's a stochastic model, so every simulation is going to be different. So we just perform the simulations over and over again and see what the average results are. Because it's not like one of those deterministic models where the results will be the same every single time. And just on a side note is that agent-based modeling is very popular for using computers to simulate infectious diseases and also other stuff like social sciences like economics or sociology, whatever. So first we should define an agent, which here we define an agent as a person. Right? Usually agents, you could define them to be whatever you want. It just has to be some sort of object, but you know, we're interested in people. So each agent represents a person within the population of New York City. And every agent possesses varying attributes. So attributes, these attributes that we speak of directly affect their probability of becoming infected. So first attribute, we have gender, right? And that's very important because Mpox mostly affects males. There's very, very little cases of female infections. And there's sexuality because most people who are affected by Mpox are non-straight males. Right? Because since females usually don't get it, they don't transmit the disease, so male to female sex doesn't really matter. And then the rest is more so to keep track of what an agent is going through at a certain point in time. So stage, we still do the susceptible, exposed, infected, and recovered, just like a traditional STIR model. But except here we don't have the equations or the dynamical system for it. And then we have the incubation, which is the number of days until before the person becomes symptomatic. So during the incubation period, the person who has been exposed to monkeypox will not have any symptoms. Recovery is the time that they take, is the time that the agent takes to recover. And so during the recovery period, the agent is still able to transmit the disease. And the last one is very important for the reproduction number that you'll see later is the contribution. And that is how many more people did this agent infect throughout the entire time span. Population building, well, we create a population of agents based on New York City's real data for age, for sexually active, for age group, because different age groups have different percentages of people who are sexually active. And you'll see why that's important later. The percent of the population on dating apps is also very important because we could see who is not only sexually active, but who's like seeking partners, more than one partner at once. And then the percent of LGBTQ plus members because they're the ones that are mostly affected. having equations or showing the code on the screen because code is very messy. So I'm just gonna, explain how the algorithm works. So first we initialize by generating a random male agent who is non-straight, who has the disease, so that the person could go on and infect other agents. And then, so the second point is that, even though Mpox is mostly driven by sexual intercourse, it doesn't have to be, right? So the agent is allowed to interact with up to 12 other agents in which they may transmit Mpox without necessarily having sexual intercourse. It might be like touching or whatever. And the sexual intercourse probability is how much the agent desires to have sex, and that will change as time goes on because more people will become aware of the disease. And also, last one is very important because we assume that all sexual intercourses that happen are consensual on both ends. And so that there's nothing sketchy going on. And I should also mention that if an agent becomes exposed to Mpox, then they get added to a list of exposed agents so that we can keep tracking them. And the reason why we do that is so that we don't have to stimulate what every single agent is doing. We can just keep track of the ones that really matter. Because the ones that are not infected and have not been exposed, we don't really care. They don't matter. So next is the incubation process, and during the incubation, the rash has not appeared yet. So the person might not even know that they have Mpox. And during this process, they cannot infect any other agents. And that is the nice thing about it. If let's say someone gets a date on Tinder or something, and if they see that the person has some sort of rash, maybe it's not such a good idea to go have sex with that person because it might be an infectious disease. So if no rash appears, then it should be fine. Now, each agent who is infected is assigned a random incubation period of 3 to 17 days because that's usually how long it takes for symptoms to show. And once the incubation period is over, the agent transitions from the exposed class to the infected class, where they can now infect other people. And also they get moved to the list of people who are infected, so that we can track who is infected and who can infect other people. So up next is recovery. And again, just like incubation, it depends on the person. So we just assign a random value from 14 to 28, to 28 days. And while the person is within the recovery period, they can infect other people. So they're still infectious, and this is when the rash appears on their skin. And it would be a good idea to, before having intercourse, to see whether this person has some sort of rash. And if they do, maybe avoid having sex. Now, if the other agent has already been exposed at some point, or infected or recovered, they've already been exposed to Mpox at some point, then nothing happens. Because as of right now, as far as we know, you cannot get Mpox twice. So after recovering successfully, the rash disappears, the person's all good. The agent moves to the recovered stage, and cannot become infected ever again. And this is perhaps one of the most important functions in the code, because agents, just like people, they should be aware, right, that there's an infectious disease out there, and maybe they should be careful. And it would not make sense to have people just keep having sex without being aware. So we designed an awareness function that is designed to curb the number of sexual intercourses with random people over time. And the desire to have sex with random people would decrease over time as the number of Mpox cases increases. So it's proportional. Well, I should say it's proportional because one goes up and the other goes down. Next up is results, and we have pretty much 4 main results here. First being age distribution, next being total infections, by stage, and then the reproduction number. So first, let's do age distribution. So we have a bar graph here, which shows the number, each bar represents the number of agents from each age group which have been infected with Mpox at some point. So this is the total. And you can see the black dashed lines. Those black dashed lines are the real data. So you can see that the simulation does quite well in matching the age groups using the data that says which age group has what percentage that is sexually active. Next up is total infections, and this is probably the main thing that we're concerned about here. First one is the comparison between the real data and the simulation using the age-based model, and you can see that we're able to match it pretty well. Right? The concavity matches for both towards the beginning half and the later half of the simulation. And for the forecast, on the bottom graph, for the forecast, we just keep running the simulation for an additional 60 days and see what happens, assuming that the behavior will continue changing the way that we predicted. And you can see that, even towards the end of the total cases where data is known, that it's starting to go away because it's not increasing as rapidly as the second or third month. So the forecast showing that it's going to plateau within the next 2 months, I think is a pretty good guess of what's going to happen. So next up is the plot of stages in Mpox, and you can see that we don't have real data to compare to because it's not reported. We don't know that. But it's a pretty good, I would say that it's a pretty good approximation. It's a pretty good guess of where people are in terms of stage of the infection of the disease. And you can see that the results look pretty much just like a deterministic SNR model results. But we're able to achieve the same thing by a different method, which is age-based modeling. And again, we just continue the simulation for the next 60 days past the data, and you can see that the infected and exposed which goes down to zero within 60 days, and recovered plateaus because pretty much everyone should recover. Next up is the reproduction number, where the number of people each agent infects is averaged together. Because the reproduction number is, by definition, is how many people can one infected person infect. And we do it for each age group, and we get around 1.87 on average, which is within the range of 1.5 to 2.7 as reported by the research. But now that monkeypox is pretty much gone, it's only like 1.1 or something before it completely disappeared. So, given that each age group has different percentages of people who are sexually active, the reproduction numbers are still pretty much within the same range. So to conclude all this, the agent-based model has the advantage over the deterministic model of being able to account for demographics. Like I said, we're able to account for stuff like gender, sexuality, sexual activity, which in a regular dynamical system, we cannot do that because everyone's the same there. And which makes sense for Mpox, because Mpox targets a very specific group of people. And not only that, usually in deterministic models, like the SER model, we would have a set of parameters which would normally be constant over time. So here we are actively keeping track of people and their behaviors over time. And yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Any questions? Yes.
I have many questions, but the first question is I would like to know what is your model? You mentioned agent-based model,
Right.
But from your presentation, I think that I don't see the model. Could you explain more detail about what is your model?
So, like I said,
I want to see some model or some parameter or some variable of the model.
right, and that's what I was saying, that it's hard to show because it's not like a system of differential equations, right, where we could see like a clear model, right, of S, E, I, R, whatever. There are no formulas for this because it's just all programming. Hold on. Yeah, that's pretty much just as close as we're going to get to having some sort of like visual model. Because since we can't write equations, it's hard to show what the model would look like.
And what about the data set? What the data set you obtain from I would like to know the data set of your study.
Okay.
Where it's come from, or you download from the website, or
Yes, the CDC website.
UCI.
Yes, and the OVID, our rolling data. So we get some data from there, but it's actually not so easy to get data for Mpox because unlike COVID, where we could see the active cases, the recovered hospitalizations, Mpox doesn't have that sort of data. So we only know the total cases for sure, and the age distribution and its origin, because we don't know this. But you know, we could assume that the results with where we do the plots, we could assume that that's probably what it looks like. Is that okay?
Okay. From your simulation result, you show the graph of the real data. You compare with the real data with your model.
Right.
Could you show that graph?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have some? To measure the distance, to measure the error of the approximation. Do you have some measurement?
Right. So usually when we would do it, we would take the RMSE value or the SSE value, the source squared errors, right? But since this is a stochastic model, it's going to change every single time. So even if I record it for this one, you know, if I run the simulation again, it's going to change. But qualitatively, I think it does a pretty good job. Because I remember for my first project where we did the dynamical system, we're able to compare exactly between the real data and the simulation, and then we just take the difference, and it's nice and easy because the errors will be the same every single time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, let me ask. So, as we mix point theory, and when we send the manuscript to data publication, we have to show some model or some algorithm for the referee.
Right.
So now I wonder that could I ask about your publications? Is that published yet?
Yeah, it's still under review, but in the manuscript that we submitted, we have code. We submitted code to go along with the manuscript. We showed the blocks of code that we use for each step. But I didn't want to put it here because it's going to be very messy because the code's very, very long and it's like very dense. So I just left it out and I just made points like this instead so that it's nicer.
Yeah, so in your manuscript, you have to show the model or the code.
Yes, I showed pretty much all the code. But, I just left it out for the sake of presentation.
Okay, and for the show the conclusion, the second one of your conclusion that you say that your method has more effective than some method, right? So, what the formula or what the tool to compare the effective this case?
So I would, well, like I said, it's hard to directly compare effectiveness on just based on sheer numbers alone, because the model, of course, would the error between the data and the model would change every single time. But when I say effectiveness, it's more so being able to capture the demographics within the population, because a traditional dynamical system cannot do that, because in a traditional SIR model, we just assume some population in, and then everyone's the same. We don't care if they're male, female, or straight, non-straight. So again, this project is hard to compare when it comes to sheer numbers. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question for student, for student. Anita. เดี๋ยวที่ฝึกนะอีกขั้นหนึ่งนะ พิชยา Yes, some question. Please.
to know if people understood. What did I do terrible job? I don't know.
Maybe because I never do this kind of research before, but to test your model, you just compare it to a real world data.
Yeah, that's what I did. I just compared it to real data for Mpox, and we just show that qualitatively that they match pretty well.
And it just helps.
I'm sorry.
Like after testing, you just use that testing to show the efficiency of your model. Is there any case to what I want to say is to test the efficiency of the model to compare the model with a new model generated and compare with it, right?
Okay, yeah.
But that is only one way to test it, or there is another way.
So I guess to test the model, we just have to keep trying and seeing how the model does, how the simulation does compared to relative to the real data, and we just have to make adjustments to the code in order to get the result that we want. Right? And optimization is a whole different thing, because in deterministic models, it's easy to optimize parameters and stuff, right? But here, since the results are different each time, even if we optimize it for one simulation, the next one it might not be quite the same. So that's why we just have to tweak it a little bit at a time. But I think for sake of optimization, that should be left to people who do optimization and people who have the computing power to run the simulation maybe several thousand times. Thank you. Any other questions? I see no one's looking at me, so I assume.
The thing is, if you have more questions, feel free to ask him. Yeah. Okay, thanks.